Hello everyone. I've got an idea I want to tell you about. It's an idea for helping the younger generation post the pandemic. Now, it's the younger generation that in many ways has been hit the hardest by the pandemic. Of course, they've escaped the worst ill health effects of that. That's mostly hit the elderly and the middle-aged. But in terms of economically and socially, in terms of their lives, the quality of their lives, they have been damaged the most. If you look at the numbers, it's clear that they've done very badly in terms of things like employment. The unemployment rate is running at about 13 or 14% for the young. Interestingly enough, it's concentrated among black and ethnic minority groups, with the unemployment rate for black young people running at about 3 times the rate of that of white people, and that for Asians running at about twice the rate of young people. So, what to do? Well, the first idea that many people have come up with is the idea of a safety net. Some sort of safety net to help people who fall out of work or whatever. In one way, their lives are damaged. And the most famous one of these, the one that most people are talking about these days, is something called universal basic income. Universal basic income is a fairly simple idea. The idea is that every person in the country gets an income, a fixed income from the state. The income will be set at around the poverty line. So that means that whether you're in work or whether you're out of work, whether you're old or young, whether you're employed or unemployed, you get you get an amount of income that will keep you out of poverty. And this is clearly a kind of safety net, is to try to make sure that nobody, after the pandemic, after the economy gets going again, that nobody falls below the poverty line. Now, in many ways, it's a neat idea. It's a very simple idea, but it has its problems. The first problem, of course, is that it costs an awful lot. You're giving money to everybody, don't forget. So that means that it costs around, some back of the envelope calculations would say it costs around 30% of gross national product. Now, that's a lot of money, and it's far more than we do. Of course, we do already have a kind of safety net. We have a social security system, old age pension, we have job seekers allowance, universal credit, and so on. That costs around 11% of GDP when you add it all together. And so the universal basic income costs far more than that. It also might well have a problem, and certainly many people have argued this, with the incentive to work. Will people feel incentivized to work if they know that they're going to get an income anyway, without work, whether they're in work or out of work? Also, if they do go into work, they'll earn an income, and that income's going to be heavily taxed, and it's got to be heavily taxed because it's got to pay for the UBI. So I think there are significant problems with the UBI idea, but I think there's even an almost more fundamental problem, a more fundamental difficulty here, and that's that it's directed at the wrong problem. I don't think that the younger generation really needs a safety net. I think they need something more like a springboard, something that enables them to launch themselves into adult life, that gives them independence and autonomy, and so they can make the most of their lives going on from their entry into the labour market or their entry into adult life more generally. Well, if we do buy that argument, what sort of springboard, what form would this springboard take? Well, there are a number of ways of thinking about how to launch people into adult life, and we've tended to use the education, university education or whatever, as a major springboard for people to set off into their life. But I think that misses, again, an important point. And the important point, the clue to what this point is, comes from the name of the economic system that we live under, capitalism. Capitalism is called capitalism for a reason. It's called capitalism because of the role of capital. It's capital that, in some sense, that makes it work. And it's capital that particularly the young need when they're starting off in life. There's some very interesting research that's looked at the factors that affect people's life course, their quality of their life, their earnings, their employment, their marriages, their relationships over the whole of the life course. And what that research shows is that having a small amount of capital, £5,000, £10,000 in savings of one form or another, at a young age, has an enormous impact on people's later lives. At the age of 22, if you have £5,000 or £10,000, at the age of 32, and indeed even at the age of 42, you tend to have higher earnings, you have better health, you have a better employment record, and your marriage is often more stable. And this interesting result, the result is not dependent upon other factors. If you control for other factors, if you look at people's education levels or their incomes, even their personality types, even if you take all that out, you still get this effect, this kind of capital effect, that having a small amount of capital at the beginning of your life can help transform your life at a later stage. So, if we buy that argument, then how do we get the solution to our problem, what sort of springboard we should have, comes quite naturally. The idea is to give capital, to give some capital to the young, the small amount of capital, and maybe do it on a universal basis, so a kind of version of universal basic income, only it's universal basic capital. So we give everybody a grant, let's say £10,000, a grant at the age when they reach the age of maturity. That could be 18, it could be 21, it could be 25. But a grant of capital, and this grant that they could use, they could spend in any way they like. They could spend it according to, they could pay off a student loan if they wanted to, or pay for university education. They could use it to put a down payment on a house. They could start with a pension if they so wished. Or they could start a new business. I think that would be a very interesting one, actually. It's very difficult to start new businesses without a small amount of capital. And I think there's going to be great opportunities when the pandemic is over for small businesses, partly because, it has to be said sadly, a lot of small businesses have gone out of business. But in a way, that creates an opportunity. And there's an opportunity that the universal basic capital idea could help support. So, £10,000 to everybody at the age of 21, let's say, and this £10,000, how will we finance? We can finance it from the inheritance tax. The inheritance tax, actually, we already have a form of inheritance tax on inheritance, on estates and estate duty. That raises actually round about £6 billion a year, and actually that exactly fits the amount of money that we would need to fund this UBC, this universal basic capital. So, I think quite an attractive idea, but of course, as everything else, it's an idea not without its difficulties or not without its critics. And the biggest critic, the biggest problem that immediately emerges, and I expect, even as you watch this, you're probably thinking about this idea, this problem, which is, won't it be blown? Won't this turn, giving £10,000 to 18-year-olds or 21-year-olds, won't they just spend it all on booze, on cigarettes, on drink of various kinds, maybe on trips to the Bahamas, or old lavish sports cars or whatever? Where did it simply be wasted? Well, I think not. And the reason why not is because of what I call the Doolittle effect. Bernard Shaw wrote a play called Pygmalion, and it was turned into a musical that some of you may have seen, quite an old musical now, called My Fair Lady. And in My Fair Lady, there's a dustman. His name is Alfred Doolittle, and he's one of the characters in the play, in the musical. And he's an inveterate beggar. Every posh person he meets, he asks them for a fiver. A fiver, the play is set round about the turn of the 20th century, so it's a fiver, well, quite a significant sum of money in those days. He asks them for a fiver, and he meets one of the central characters in the play, one of the other central characters in the play, Professor Higgins, and promptly launches into his spiel about how he would like to have £5, a fiver from him. Can't you just give me a fiver, Governor, he says. Professor Higgins is rather convinced by the spiel that Alfred Doolittle, the dustman, gives, and says, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll give you a tenner." And Doolittle says, "Oh no, don't give me a tenner, Governor. I don't want a tenner. I just want a fiver. A tenner is a large sum of money, and that would just make a man all prudent-like. It'll make him take care of himself. He'll take care of his wife and things. I don't want any of that. I just want to have enough money to give a good spree for myself and possibly the wife as well. And otherwise, so just give me what I ask for, just my fiver, not the tenner." And so Higgins gives him the fiver. And I think this is tapping into a kind of profound psychological truth here. If you have a windfall, and it's a small windfall, yes, you're tempted to blow it on a treat for yourself. You're tempted to spend on a treat for yourself. Why not? And maybe your partner as well. If you get a large sum, and £10,000 is a large sum, particularly for most young people who've got nothing like that in the form of savings, if any at all, if you get £10,000, then that's actually that's a life-changing sum of money. And you're much more likely to use it sensibly, responsibly, to invest it in a way that will help your future. I think I call the Doolittle effect to help overcome what you might call the splurge problem. I think it's very unlikely. There will be some people, of course there'll be some people who'll blow it. Hopefully they won't get into the Daily Mail or the Sun. I expect they will, unfortunately, but I think that's just the price we have to pay. But I don't think for most people will use the grant in the ways I've been suggesting. We're coming to the end of a rather dreadful period in our lives, and particularly for the younger generation. The American novelist Thornton Wilder said on one occasion, "Money is like manure, no use to anyone, and that is as evenly spread, helping young things to grow." That's what a UBC does. That's what a universal basic capital does. It takes the wealth of one generation and uses it to fertilize the growth of the next. I commend it to you. Thank you.